This is my first time to do one of these, so I appreciate you having me on, man. I had to figure it out real quick.
Now, I want you to introduce yourself for those who don't know who you are.
Okay, yeah. So my name is Joshua, and I am currently the campaign manager for Dan Larson. He's running for the U.S. Senate in the Montana Republican primary. And I am pretty much just a guy that was sitting on his couch in January watching Andrew do his thing. And, once he got suspended his campaign, I just really felt like I should have done more. And I just got on Twitter, and next thing you know, I'm working with campaigns and really, man, just networking. Like, it's crazy. I've never had that many followers before on Twitter. It just like escalated and snowballed real quick. I'll outline this for everybody. So within the Montana Republican Party, there's a group of people who are just really radical, right wing, these type of like anti-vaxxers. Really, there's a part of the state where it's more like that sovereign mindset of like federal government ain't going to tell me what to do. They don't have no control over me. I don't want to pay no taxes, that kind of mindset, right? And there's this one particular publication. I'm not going to mention it because the most exciting thing to me about this publication is all the representatives that I've spoken to in Montana and, community leaders, notable figures like that. Most of them are not aware of this publication. So it is kind of like, it's a little bit below the surface, but it's one of those real disturbing type of publications. It's very censored. It's very, it's really like a little cult. And in this cult, what they do is, so to give you an idea, when that Missoula story aired for Dan, this lady, she went and she advertises, she's a little, she's like one of the state representative candidates, right? And she spoke to that editor for that little publication, and she basically had Dan up on that site, and it said Republican Socialist, and it had a picture of Dan, and it's just like online bullying is really what it comes down to. But this same particular lady, she I guess I could mention her name, by the way. So her name's Teresa Manzella, and in Dan's county there in Ravalli County, she had put a story out about on Facebook looking for like people to come to her house and do her nails while there was these social restrictions. And so this nail salon tech lady that she contacted, she owns a nail salon there in Ravalli County. She said, I can't come to your house because I'll lose my license. Like it's not sanctioned. So she got so upset about this that she started like talking about this lady on Facebook and telling people to boycott her salon. And this lady was upset about this enough. It got back to her that she went to the office of the Commissioner of Political Practices in Montana, which is basically like the FEC for like a state level. Because candidates aren't supposed to be like intimidating their people in their district, by threatening boycotts and stuff. And so anyways, this got in the newspaper and all that. And the next, like, I don't know, a couple of days later, this lady, she has kids and whatnot. And her, one of her kids walked out on the porch and picked up this little like armor piercing bullet that was sitting face up on her front porch. And it was just a little message to be sent, like it's that intimidation, that kind of like real, I don't know how to put it like nicely, man. It's just like that type of, I would just call it evil in the world that you don't want to see. You don't want to see them get into office. So I think Dan is definitely, dealing with those type of forces in Montana as well.
Crazy, man. That sounds like dark shit. I don't know if you're familiar with that show, but they got this family on there who is running drugs, and they're like that, man. They're and everything.
Yeah, no, I'm not familiar with the show, man, but it sounds like something to check out. Like I don't know, this feels like some sort of like Ozark type of vibe,
Yeah, but you know, you got to think if there, you know, I mean, I understand like there's a mentality out there. You know, I'm from North Carolina, so I understand, you know, there's mentalities kind of everywhere you go. But, you know, I don't know. I kind of feel like that corruption, it's pervasive all throughout our government. It's not just out there. It's not just here. It's not just in North Carolina. It's just permeated our government to such a point that it's almost like, what do we do? What can we do? You know, how do we fight these powers that be? It gets frustrating at times.
Well, and I was going to mention this one as well. So another example of this would be, you know, reaching out to candidates, you know, point blank, like I'll reach across the aisle as a Republican, you know, especially it helps that like Dan is well known for supporting Andrew Yang. So we were able to talk to some Democratic candidates and different community leaders and organizations that lean to the left, you know, and they're kind of pointing out like, okay, you might want to think about talking to this person and that person. And I was talking to one candidate and they said, see, like talking to people in Montana, I've heard this several times being from Texas and working with Dan, they'll just say like, why would I support somebody that has a campaign manager from Texas? You know, it's like, okay, you're not from here. You're an outsider. Like, you know, you're not really necessarily welcome. And so I was telling this candidate about that and they said, oh, well, you don't have to worry about that. Steve Daines never would have allowed Dan to hire a campaign manager from Montana anyways. And I was like, whoa, like, are you saying that if he had tried to hire somebody that like Steve Daines would have like blacklisted them, you know, and just like try to make it like political suicide for that person? And they go, exactly. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. You know, like Dan is a small first time candidate, you know, like it shouldn't like require that type of bullying to silence, you know, just your average Joe candidate getting into the race to have an opportunity to let people listen to him. And yeah, so like reaching out to some of these folks that, you know, were recommended, like, hey, these are some more moderate voices. And they're honestly like, most of them scared to talk to us. Like playing this kind of game where like you call, they pick up, they're not expecting to pick up a number from Texas, you know? And it's like you just get that sense like they're trying to get you off the phone and give you an excuse like, hey, send me an email and we'll try and figure out what time when maybe I can talk to Dan. And then you send him an email, no reply. You ask him again, no reply. You call him, you leave him a voicemail. Like you're just basically like they won't have anything to do with you, you know? I'm just making sure the connection's still good, man. We are soldiering on, man. We are rocking through this, right?
Yeah, we lost your vocals there for a few seconds, but it's all good. I was just gonna say, you know, I live up here in Vermont, so all I have to, there's kind of two castes of people up here in Vermont. You got your simple country folks, and then you got your more affluent folks. And there's kind of really no in between. It's you're either like Richie Rich or you're poor as piss here.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's really weird because I don't know. It's going to be hard for me. It's like you say, you know, being an outsider and stuff like that. You know, it's quite obvious that I'm not from around here, that I'm from the South. But the fact of the matter is, you know, I come from the South, yes, but I am that broke folk vote. You know, I am that person who understands what it's like. And if you look at the houses around here, man, they've got huge houses, and these houses are split into like 3 or 4 different apartments, right? Because nobody can afford to have a house on their own. It's crazy how things are set up. And the taxes in the state are just ungodly, man. It costs so much to live here I mean, something's got to change, you know. And it's going to take people like us because, you know, Dan is running as a Republican and I'm running as a Republican. And we're all fighting for the same ideas, though. And it's going to be so important, especially to have Republicans who are going into offices who can support from that side of the aisle. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, I think the candidates that I support are the candidates that aren't out taking dollars from special interests. You know, one of the things that so Dan's opponent is Steve Daines, and Steve Daines is in this group of senators. I've done so much time on the FEC, I can probably name all of them. A group of people like Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Cory Gardner, Steve Daines. I won't bore all the listeners unless they want me to with who those people are. But basically, it's a group of people who take money from the same special interest super PACs. They all vote together, and it's like this little like exclusive club they have, and folks like me and you are left out, and those people are never going to, like, exactly what I was talking about with this type of cultish mentality from this smaller publication and this one particular candidate at the state level in Montana. These are not the people that are open to new ideas. They're very closed-minded. They're the type of people that have this you're either MAGA or you're a socialist. They make things very binary, and people like us are needed to run in order to have someone that's open-minded on the other side of the aisle, and like, make no mistake about it, all the policies that we support, UBI, ranked choice voting, VAT, democracy dollars, none of that's actually going to happen without bipartisan support. So we have to have candidates in the Republican Party that are pushing this as well. And more importantly, we have to have candidates who are not tied down to corporations, or we'll never have, you'll never be represented that way.
Man, that's crazy that you're just talking about that, because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, you were talking about special interests, and then you got this group of candidates who are going, and all these same people are taking money from this one group, and they're all voting the same way. They're all going the same, and it just makes me so damn mad, because it's almost like they're just paying their little minions to go be their little people in Congress and stuff. And oh no, we can't vote for that because we're getting money from these guys over here. Man, that shit makes me so fucking mad, dude. And it just shows you the level of corruption that has just permeated our government today. And it makes you mad, man.
It really does. I mean, it really does. I'll give you another practical example of this too, because so if you listen to Steve Daines talk, he'll tell you about how great the Keystone XL pipeline is for Montana. And, he's taking easily north of six figures every year in contributions from, super PACs like ExxonMobil, Marathon Petroleum, those kind of well-known oil and gas special interest super PACs. And they're lining his pockets. And so he's going to sit here and tell you, oh, this is great for Montana. It's going to bring a bunch of new jobs to Montana. It's what it's going to do. It's going to bring jobs for those businesses, those corporations. It's not going to be mostly people from Montana that get new jobs. It's going to be people from ExxonMobil and all these other oil and gas providers that bring people from out of state. Back in, I think it was 2014, they had they built an oil pipeline further up in northwestern Montana, like more towards the Canadian border. And this was, I think it's called the Bakken area. But they brought in probably like 200-300 workers, right? And they set up these temporary apartment complexes for them. And so they build, temporary housing for these people because they're not from Montana, Steve Daines is going to tell you that we're bringing all these jobs to Montana. Like, no, we're bringing all these people out of state, into Montana. And when you've got that many guys hanging out in an apartment complex with, you know, a nice paycheck in their pockets, and it's in a very rural area and there's no women around, next thing you know, drug cartels pop in, and you've got, you know, they got prostitutes and drugs available. So that is basically, you know, where human trafficking started. If some of y'all are familiar, I had mentioned on Twitter that Billings, Montana is actually number 5 in the country for most cases of reports of human trafficking. And that's why, because that's still left over. So these people come in and they drill for like 2-3 years, these out of state folks that, you know, that's good business for the oil and gas company. And then when they leave, those cartels, the prostitutes and the drugs, you know, they stay. And so this Keystone, you know, XL pipeline is just going to be, you know, another example of this, just on a larger scale. And so it's just funny to me that people sit there, like, I've heard so many people talk about, oh, this is going to be a great thing for Montana, like, you know, Republicans in Montana. And I just feel like they're sheep, like they're not thinking for themselves anymore. They're just hearing, yeah, man. I just think they're sheep, you know, and I think that's why it's so important for Dan and for yourself and other people to run, so that there's an actual, like, you know, voice of truth for people to listen to.
I kind of feel like that's because they had us trapped in this left-right dichotomy for so long that it's like, you know, I mean, I have such vehemence. I really don't want to run as a Republican. I really don't want to run as a Democrat, to be honest with you. But it seems to be, you know, if I'm going to support Andrew and his policies, the best way that I could do that is to go in as a Republican and maybe change the mindset. And, you know, it's hard to do once you get into those institutions, though. And that's what I'm afraid of is I'm afraid that even if we get some good people in there, man, they're just going to shred you from the moment you get in there with every, you know, well, you better do this or you're not going to be up here long. You know, I mean, they kind of make you toe the line, if that makes sense, because it's almost like they have to keep us trapped in that left-right dichotomy in this war. You know, that way every election time you got to get in your camp. We got to hit those hot button issues. And once we start pressing on those hot button issues, then everybody jumps into their camps. And that's where somebody like Andrew is so refreshing. And coming from the conservative side, man, it was such an honor to help further that campaign as much as we could, you know, with our little bitty voice. But I don't even think that there was a question there. It was really just more of an observation as to, you know, somebody like Andrew Yang was so important, you know?
Yeah, well, you know, what you said right there makes me think about these. There's a handful of Republican candidates that Dan and I have been able to talk to, you know, like at least contact, but they are not, you know, it's not like this conversation you and I are having, you know. They're reluctant to actually say what's on their mind, you know, and that's because the establishment wields a lot of power. You know, you look at, for example, what Jonathan Herzog is dealing with in New York, right? Like, these are folks that are literally trying to squash out democracy by not letting us vote. And I was just like, wow, like, it's amazing to me how far, I mean, it shouldn't be amazing, but it really is. Because like I said, like, it wasn't that long ago, I was just sitting on my couch, you know, watching CNN, you know, I was really like not involved like I should have been. And it's amazing to me, like, the lengths that the establishment will go to hold on to their power, you know, like they're more than willing to bend the rules. Like, they're willing to break the rules. They're willing to do whatever it takes, to be 100% honest with you, you know?
And that's crazy to me, man, because then you get into this whole I don't know. It kind of makes you wonder, like, how off base shows like House of Cards and what's that other one? Designated Survivor. You know, all these shows that we see on TV, because we know that the media is controlled by 6 corporations, and we know those 6 corporations are outlets for, you know, the powers that be, and they've helped form the narrative. That's why it's called programming. You know, without going too deep into like this whole conspiracy mindset, we know that they have an agenda, and we know that fighting it is just so freaking tough. And I think that we as a society are starting to wake up, and this crisis that we're going through right now has really illustrated to the American people just how inept our current institution really is. I mean, they've had all this money for corporations, and the American people have gotten, or some of us have gotten, not even all of us have gotten that little piddling ass $1,200 check, you know, which for a lot of us, that's barely fucking rent for 1 month, man. And we're going on like, how long has this been going on now?
Oh, yeah. Yep. And Wall Street waited, I think they had to wait all of like 4 days to get their money, you know? Like, I honestly, I don't understand why. Well, I understand why, but I just don't agree that Wall Street gets to get their money right away with no congressional approval. But, you know, and also when I asked Republicans about this, they don't have much of an answer. You know, I said, okay, if UBI is such a bad thing, then why is, you know, because they'll tell you that it's welfare, basically, right? That's what they think. I'm like, then why is corporate welfare okay? And it's almost like we've been conditioned to believe that Wall Street deserves this money, that somehow like it's okay for them. I can't give you a good reason other than it's tradition, you know. And yeah, man. I also wanted to add what I was saying earlier, actually, to give you an example of how they will target a candidate that like speaks out against them. I know of a candidate in Montana who basically, and also this is insane to me, but for this one particular like cult-like group there, anytime a Republican votes with a Democrat, like anything that their governor in Montana is a Democrat, Steve Bullock. So anytime they vote to what this cult deems to be a Democrat piece of legislation, they go after him. They call him a rhino. And in this one particular case, they started, like, people were giving this guy a friend request, right? And so he didn't know any better. So he like accepts their friend request. Next thing you know, it's like 4 or 5 people going through his friends list, and they're like just digging up every possible like loose end that, or like, they're trying to make every wild assumption that they can and tie to say like, okay, well, this guy is friends with this person who posted this thing about socialism. And they just have like this laundry list of how this guy's a socialist just because he's willing to be friends with somebody on Facebook, you know? And then they also went from, in his particular race, he went from having like one candidate that was running with him to now he has like, I think it was 4 people. So they'll send like 3 other candidates in the race at you. And they're really like they're really serious about it, man. They're like, they're just bullies, you know? So that's why these other people are reluctant to talk to Dan, because they don't want to have to deal with that themselves, you know?
Yeah, I can understand their reluctance, you know, but I don't know. It seems to me like, I don't know. I'm kind of like, I'm built a little bit different because, you know, I've been called some of the worst things that a person can be called, you know, and I've had to endure some of the most, you know, crazy circumstances that anybody could endure. So it's almost, you know, I'd almost welcome a confrontation like that, because it would allow me to actually put these people in their place where they need to be. It would bring me a whole lot of joy to just like take them down a rung. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I mean, hey, no bully likes getting punched in the face, like they really don't. Like you hit a bully in their mouth and all of a sudden, like, you're probably going to see a different response from them. And I actually, I feel the exact same way. My particular goal for the rest of Dan's campaign is to campaign against this lady who had this site post that Dan was a socialist. She's actually been to his hardware store before and made like these little subtle threats. She's like this little, she calls herself, I forget the exact phraseology, but it's basically like she calls herself like a little Donald Trump is, so she's like a little dictator is,
yeah.
And she's proud of that,
I know that's right. I'll be like, bitch, you need to get on up out my face. Like, we ain't having that up around here. You better go take that somewhere else. We ain't trying to hear that noise.
No, I mean, think about how crazy that is. Is like a lady who owns a nail salon just said, "Hey, I'm sorry, I can't come to your house because, it's against my it's against the state law. Like, I'll lose my license." That's all she did to upset this lady, and then she just like is on a power trip, and she knows enough people to like get a boycott movement working. It's just crazy. It's like, I wish I could articulate this a little better, but I'm just thinking at times that I've reached out and talked to people, and you just get that gut feeling like, man, this is not like a normal type of conversation to have with somebody. Like, I'm getting a weird feeling, I actually called this one lady. She's running for the public superintendent of schools in Montana. She's running as a Republican. She's running unopposed. And I called her and she picked up, and obviously, like I said, she didn't know who I was, right? She probably didn't recognize the area code or anything. And I explained to her that we're having a pretty decent conversation for, I don't know, a minute or two. And when I say, hey, I'm, Dan Larson's campaign manager, and I just wanted to know if you had like maybe 5 minutes sometime this week to talk to him. She says, "Oh gosh, I'm just pulling up to the house right now. I'm so busy. But I'll tell you what, why don't you email me and we'll see if we can't figure out a time, right?" And I actually was like dumb enough to buy that. I was like, oh man, I guess I just caught her right before, she pulled up. So I get a call the next day from a lady who's her campaign manager, and she's telling me, oh yeah, her name's Elsie. Elsie's not going to talk to any of the candidates until after the June 2nd primary. And I was like, oh man, that's like such a line of bull, It's basically just like, it's their polite way of saying, you're not part of the establishment, and we're not interested in talking to you or having anything to do with you. And the funny thing about that is, I can't tell you how many media members, how many other representatives have told me this exact same line, the exact phraseology from the media members. It's the same line, probably from at least a dozen sources. We currently don't have the resources to pursue political stories at this time, and we're not going to do anything with political coverage until after the primary date. And I'm like, man, I feel like Steve Daines' campaign sent out like an alert to tell people, like, okay, just tell all of our opponents this when they contact you, or there'll be hell to pay, I mean, I know that makes me sound a little crazy, but I honestly think there's something to that.
It doesn't, man, because I've done enough research on just government in general and the horrific things that our federal government is capable of, to know that, a lot of people experience a lot of things on a lot of different levels. And this corruption that we've been talking about for the last, 30 almost 40 minutes is it goes deep, and it's so pervasive. And I hate to believe that, this is the future that we're going to leave for, like, my son. I don't want to leave that future for him. I want his future to be so much better, and for him not to have to endure those things. And I don't know, man, we're going to have to figure out a way to overthrow just this I don't know, these chains that they've had us under for so long, you know. And I think we will. I think we're waking up, and I think we're going to make it, man. We're going to make a better future, because, you know, and it's going to take all of us. If we can create a future that's dystopian, then man, damn, we can create a future that's good too. So, brother, I want to thank you so much for becoming on here and being a part of this show. And I look forward to further conversations with you. Any last words that you want to tell everybody?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Russell, thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed it. I do want to encourage anyone out there that's watching this that is wondering, you know, how can I get involved in the Yang Gang? You know, one thing that I've noticed is that the Yang Gang is very supportive of Andrew, and rightfully so. And it's a little bit easier. You know, it started out as a presidential campaign. It's kind of easy when you have, or it's a little easier when you have just one person to follow and support. But you know, I'm very hopeful that Andrew will run in 2024 and win. And when that day comes, you know, Andrew walks into the Oval Office, it's going to take legislators in Congress in order to actually make these policies a reality. And so it's very important to find a candidate that you support. And, you know, you can, man, just message them on Twitter. Every candidate has a website where you can get involved in volunteering. And I think also a lot of people think like, oh man, you know, I've got all this going on. I don't know if I have time to volunteer. You know, literally, like, you can take like 15 minutes out of your week and send a couple emails. Like, I promise you, if you contact these candidates and ask them, what can I do to help? They will find an activity for you to do, and they'll work with you. And really just, I think just hearing from people out there that they support these candidates, even just offering to help, really would just, like, you know, it just does a lot to boost the morale. And I should send a special shout out to a few people if it's okay. I want to shout out Zoe McLaughlin, who has helped out Dan's campaign like so much. We're very thankful. I want to shout out Brendan from the Humanity Forward group, who is just a boss above, like a boss of bosses. I want to shout out, man, I'm going to forget a bunch of people here. I want to shout out Tyler from Jonathan Herzog's campaign. I want to shout out Jonathan from Heidi's campaign. Boy, I hope I don't have that wrong. But you know who you are, man. Heidi's campaign manager has been just awesome to me. I want to shout out Ian, who is Blair Walsingham's campaign manager. I want to shout out anyone who has done anything to volunteer for any of these candidates or Andrew. Like, man, that like all of this volunteer effort is what it takes in order to overthrow this establishment and take a little bit of power away and control away from them.
Absolutely. Joshua, thank you so much for being here, brother. Thank you so much.